Hello, and a very warm welcome to this episode of Venena Mundi. In the previous episode, we looked at how poisons and toxins are absorbed in the digestive tract. Specifically, we saw that since food molecules differ enormously in physical state, size and solubility, no single absorption mechanism works for all. Instead, digestion has to use several such mechanisms, starting with simple diffusion at one end and pinocytosis and active transport at the other. Toxins and poisons just take advantage of these processes and do so according by how closely they resemble given nutrients and the way these themselves are absorbed. The thinness of the intestinal walls and the underlying capillary network carrying blood is also vitally important. It means that food molecules and harmful substances don't have very far to travel between the inside of the digestive tract and the blood, which then transports them to the rest of the body. In this episode, we'll now look at what happens to poisons and toxins when they're inhaled or when they come into contact with the skin. So, do we still need 4 separate absorption mechanisms for them to get inside our bodies? Why did miners take canaries underground? And why being poisoned through the skin is probably the least of your worries. It's time for another episode of Venena Mundi. The digestive system is highly effective at absorbing poisons and toxins because it's doing precisely what it was designed to do, namely to take food eaten by mouth, break it down, and take useful molecules into the body. Absorbing poisons and toxins is just an extension of this. After all, these are just molecules, and the digestive system treats them like any other. But the roles of the lungs and skin are very different. Let's look at the lungs first. The purpose of the lungs is to bring in air from the atmosphere and transfer oxygen into the bloodstream. From there it circulates around the body, with one of the main destinations of the gas being the brain. The lungs then remove carbon dioxide, one of the waste products of cellular respiration, from the blood and expel it into the exhaled air. In order for this gas exchange to work efficiently, the lungs have a vast surface area made up of millions of tiny air sacs that form the lung tissue. In the average adult, this area is estimated to be the size of a tennis court, about the same size as the surface area of the intestines. The air sacs are surrounded by capillaries carrying circulating blood. The blood flow is very rapid and the walls of the blood capillaries and the air sacs of the lungs are very thin, typically only 1 cell thick. This is even less than the digestive system. Furthermore, the cells are often flattened to make the distance even less. Consequently, it is extremely easy for oxygen and carbon dioxide to pass in and out of the blood. Since both these gases are highly soluble, there is little need for fancy absorption mechanisms, so nearly all the gases passing through do so by simple diffusion. In other words, the gases first dissolve in a very thin layer of water covering the surface of the air sacs before they pass through by diffusing across a concentration gradient. Interestingly, carbon dioxide is more soluble than oxygen, which means that it is easier for the body to get rid of carbon dioxide than it is to absorb oxygen. In this way, while at rest, an average person breathes in between 5 to 8 litres of air per minute, and about 300 millilitres of oxygen is transferred from the air sacs to the blood, and a similar volume of carbon dioxide is breathed out. Unfortunately, this very high efficiency of gas diffusion and absorptions also makes it extremely easy for toxic gases like hydrogen sulfide or nitric oxides and other volatile chemicals like benzene or chloroform to pass from the lungs into the blood, especially so if the gas or substance is also highly soluble. Importantly, the breathing rate and the rate of blood flow are critically important when poisoning takes place through the lungs. The faster the breathing rate and the faster the blood flow, the more rapidly a gas or volatile substance will be absorbed. This is why miners took canaries and other birds with them down the mines. When a toxic gas like carbon monoxide was present, the canary, with its much faster breathing rate, would fall unconscious much earlier than the slower breathing miners, and thus alert them to the danger. Apart from gases, particles of solid or liquid can also be absorbed from the lungs, but their size is a critical factor. Fortunately, the lungs are able to defend themselves to a degree against such foreign matter. That's because the walls of the air passages are coated with sticky secretions that trap most inhaled particles above a certain size. These are then coughed up and swallowed, sometimes posing a different set of problems. Unfortunately, many very small particles can bypass these defense mechanisms, whereupon they enter the air sacs where they may be absorbed into the blood, especially when they're able to dissolve and diffuse through the walls, for example lead from former car exhausts. Much recent publicity has also been given to the dangers posed by metallic particles in the many years of dust accumulated on the London Underground. These act in a very similar way to the other highly dangerous material that damages lungs, asbestos. Neither is soluble or diffuses through the walls of the air sacs, but instead they stay there, causing severe irritation, which over a long time eventually leads to serious diseases like asbestosis, and which can in extreme cases lead to cancer. On a final note, one of the other reasons why the toxin route through the lungs is so dangerous is because once absorbed, any chemicals travel directly into the blood and into other organs, not least the brain by way of the heart. That's why the effects of gases and other volatile substances, like anesthetics or solvents, are so extremely rapid. Even a few seconds of exposure can lead to unconsciousness or death. At least in the case of the digestive system, the blood first passes through the liver, which is designed to catch toxic substances and deactivate them before they can cause further harm elsewhere. Let's now turn to poisoning through the skin. In contrast to the lungs and the digestive system, absorption through the skin is relatively slow and inefficient. For a start, the skin forms a thick, largely impermeable barrier between the outside world and the inside of the body. There are many layers of cells in the skin, including those containing a tough, impermeable protein called keratin, which is highly effective at preventing most particles from getting through. Also, the skin contains relatively few blood capillaries, and the rate of blood flow is slow. Therefore, while some chemicals can pass through the skin and enter the bloodstream, this is generally much less than the lungs or the digestive system. However, for chemicals like solvents and liquids that are soluble in fat, for example some organophosphate insecticides, the skin can still be an important route of entry into the body. So whilst you do not need to worry too much about poisoning through the skin, you should still always take precautions, like wearing gloves. Even then, such safeguards may not be totally effective against all toxins. One notable example concerns the chemist Karen Wetterhan, an American professor at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire, in the 1990s. Specializing in toxic metal exposure, she was handling dimethyl mercury when a few drops splashed on her hand. Wearing latex gloves, she thought nothing of it and continued working. But then, approximately 3 months after the initial accident, she began experiencing brief episodes of stomach discomfort and noted significant weight loss. Tragically, by now it was too late. In spite of numerous treatments, she eventually slipped into a coma and died less than a year after her exposure. It was later found that dimethyl mercury can, in fact, rapidly permeate different kinds of latex gloves and enter the skin within about 15 seconds. Her death came as a major shock, especially since the accidental exposure occurred despite her having taken all the required safety measures known at the time. As a result, it is now recommended to wear plastic laminate gloves whenever handling dimethyl mercury, and indeed any other mercury compounds. Okay, so after watching this episode, we can draw some important conclusions about the different routes by which poisons can enter the body. Setting aside the physical state and the solubility of a substance, The thickness of the tissues through which the chemical has to pass into the body is another vitally important factor for overall toxicity. We saw in the previous episode that the distance travelled by molecules across the digestive system wall into the bloodstream is already very low, resulting in a very effective absorption process in the intestines. In the lungs, however, where the walls are often just 1 or 2 cells thick rather than 3 or 4 as in the digestive tract, this is far exceeded. The amount of blood flowing through the lungs is likewise significantly higher. Moreover, the solubility of many gases and airborne particles means that simple diffusion is often the only mechanism necessary for the toxins to enter the body in the lungs. When all these facts are put together, it goes to show why poisoning through the lungs is undoubtedly the most dangerous route for toxins to enter the body. And there is yet another reason for this. Whilst blood from the digestive system always passes through the liver first, which is designed to make harmful substances less toxic, the blood from the lungs circulates straight to other parts of the body. As for poisoning through the skin, whilst this happens, it is relatively an uncommon occurrence. The skin forms a highly effective barrier to most harmful substances, and even then, the blood circulation through the skin is limited, so the spread of the toxin to the rest of the body is relatively slow. Of course, there are exceptions to this, in particular when the skin is punctured by a sharp object, such as a thorn, fang, or a man-made object such as a knife or a syringe needle. In the next episode, we'll look at the role of the liver in the defense against poisons and toxins, particularly those which enter the body through the digestive system. Right, that's the end of this episode. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and use the comments below to say what you think or what you'd like to see in the future. In the meantime, please don't forget to subscribe so that I don't get lonely, and please click on the notification bell to make sure you don't miss the next episode. Bye for now, and see you next time.